Hi and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. Today we are talking all about the Carousel of Despair. You know that cycle of old repeating emotional patterns of pain, fear and self-doubt? Well, today you'll learn how to gently step off this carousel and experience emotional freedom and inner peace by reconnecting with your inner child and working with your emotions, not against them. Okay, David, so this carousel of despair, I know it's something that you've defined from working for many, many years with your clients. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, Alex, I think it's the number one thing that many of my clients get stuck on, and it goes down to the first fundamental principle of our model. You are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim of them. So it's very important for me to clarify that because so many people misunderstand that teaching. I'm not saying you shouldn't create emotions. I'm not saying you should stop creating emotions. I'm saying the opposite. Emotions are natural and normal, but you create them. Another person doesn't put an emotion into your body. This is created by your, what I would call beliefs, or you may call perceptions, or your view or your lens on a situation or an incident or an issue or a person. So you view a situation, then you create an emotion. Now the problem that comes with a carousel of despair, then you start to react against the emotion. You start to view your reactions against the emotion that you're creating. So this is why this is so important. Remember, the emotions are always the consequence. You have to go to the belief or the thought. And this is why a person gets stuck on the carousel of despair, because they're always telling you the emotion. I'm scared. I'm fearful. I'm frightened. I can't cope. They're explaining an emotion, which is real and necessary for them to explain. But that's will just keep them on the carousel.
So there's a couple of steps going on here. There's the belief or the thought processes generated by the internal core beliefs that we have that put us onto the carousel. So that's kind of step one. And then what keeps us in this loop, in this cycle, repeating, are the emotions which are created by the thoughts and the beliefs. But then the emotions become the center of our attention, our focus. They become like the vortex, which draws our attention and our energy. So if we go back to step one, then, David, the beliefs, what sort of beliefs or what sort of self-talk or patterns of thinking typically put someone on this carousel?
So it's what I would call a misalignment in your belief system. When you believe something should happen, or you believe someone should act in a certain way, or you have a belief on the way that reality is, doesn't work out the way that you believe it should. So I have a little saying about the inner child part of your mind, your psyche. The inner child wants what it wants when it wants it. Mm-hmm. So if something is not happening in the way that that part of your mind wants, what it does immediately, it creates what I call a red light feeling, anger, frightened, fearful. I'll give you an example. We live in the unknown. We live in uncertainty. That's our home. That's where we've always been. That's where we always will be. We don't know the future. Now, for that part of our mind that I call the inner child, it really dislikes that. And so it will set up a chain of emotions trying to take control, trying to be future-proofed, trying to get people or events to go the way that they like it. But unfortunately, that then puts them on the carousel. And I want to say one more thing before we ask me the next question. That then puts them on the carousel. Now for the inner child, This is why it's so difficult to get off the carousel. That carousel becomes familiar and perversely known.
Yeah.
So it knows the carousel. So in a way, it believes it's in control, but it's not. And there's the paradox.
Okay, so before we go on to why we get stuck, I really want to dig into the beliefs. So you've said when the inner child part of our mind or our ego hits a situation in reality which it believes is not fair, is not right, is unwanted, is not the way things should be, that is one set of beliefs that create the emotions which then hook us, draw us on to the carousel. What about beliefs to do with, you talk about the these three lies within our belief system a lot, David. I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, I can't cope. Are they also in the set of kind of core beliefs that may draw us on?
I would say for most of my clients, that would be the three lies. I call them lies because all of those are untrue. So if you've ever heard yourself in your self-talk ever say, I'm not good enough, I can't cope, or I'm unlovable or unworthy, that will then create the red light, which will then draw you onto the carousel. And so you then start describing your emotions. I'm frightened, I'm fearful, I'm anxious. You're just describing the emotion that keeps you on the carousel.
So this could be any everyday life situation, whether it's to do with relationships, friendships, work situations, health situations, financial situations. If we allow any of these core beliefs that we might be holding to be triggered, then we experience an emotion of self-doubt or an emotion of fear, any red light emotion as you describe it, anger, frustration, hopelessness. Bang, we're on the carousel, yes. but then the carousel only gains momentum, it only gets a speed that keeps us stuck if we allow the emotions to become the focus of our attention, and also if we, I guess, amplify the emotions so that we build the energy of the emotions by almost like obsessing on them.
That's right, Alex. And instead of the belief becoming the foundation, what I call the first domino, you skip to the consequence, the emotion. And so you start focusing on the emotion. Oh, I'm stressed. I'm frightened. I'm scared. I'll give you an example. Just say you deliver a piece of work. You're an adult. You're working. You deliver a piece of work to your boss and he doesn't like it. Immediately then the belief goes, oh, that must be because I'm not good enough. That then creates an emotion
of like self-doubt,
exactly,
self-lack.
Oh, he doesn't like me, I'm going to get the sack. Yeah. Oh, this is the end, I won't be able to cope. We haven't got, and now you're on the carousel. Now, this for the part of the psyche that I would call the inner child is very familiar. And so as in a way, it believes that it has some familiarity, some control on that because it's going around what it knows.
Yeah.
And so what it does, it sparks off other emotions. And so the emotion, the boss goes, I'm not too sure about that. To you, what you're hearing is, oh, you're not good enough, or you can't cope, or there's something wrong with you. And so in your mind, the boss is just saying, oh, actually, on second thoughts, I like your point. You haven't even listening to that. Yeah. You're listening to the thing that trips you, and you go into your familiarity.
Yeah, and this is like the domino effect. Or I just kind of visualize this idea. If you've got a box of fireworks and you light by accident, one small one gets lit, and then the whole box goes off. So an external situation, say something to do with your boss at work or your partner at home, triggers one little belief, let's say, misaligned belief, but then that then kicks off all the other beliefs connected with self-doubt. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not going to be able to cope with this. This is going to be a disaster. The world's going to end. And then next thing you know, it's like, wow, what started as like a small thing, which could have been easily stopped in its tracks if we were more mindful of our thinking, has just now exploded into something far more emotionally unmanageable inside our heads.
And not appropriate to the situation, because on the imagined situation, your boss, while you're doing all this in your head, your boss could be looking at your piece of work and going, oh, actually, I see your point. That's very interesting. You haven't heard that. You don't hear that.
And that's the confirmation bias.
That's the confirmation bias, because that's what I just say. Because your inner child will then tell you, there it is. That's proof we're not good enough. Oh, he's only saying that. He doesn't really mean that. He can see we're upset. So he's trying to make you see. And so you're on the carousel.
Yeah.
And this is why the carousel is so powerful. And this is why, for a lot of my clients, they are so committed to talking, thinking, acting on their emotions that they can't get off the carousel. Most of my clients will say something like this. I normally start a session and say, do we agree on the 3 fundamentals? The first one, are you the creator of your emotions? I'm not saying you shouldn't create emotions. I'm not saying emotions are wrong. I'm saying the opposite. Emotions are absolutely natural. They make us human beings. They make us unique. But do you believe you create them? Now, this is what I normally hear. Yes, but. So there's no but there. You either do or you don't. What they're actually saying, well, of course, David, I believe emotions don't float around the air, or the people don't send me their emotions. Of course, I create them. But my inner child cannot accept that. Because when the inner child accepts that, the familiarity, even though, and this is what a lot of clients have great difficulty with, Alex, even though the familiarity doesn't work, the inner child will go to the familiar because it knows it. And so the opposite is the unknown. The inner child will always want to step on the carousel.
So the familiarity is the emotional discomfort.
Yes.
The unknown. What lies in the unknown then, David? If we were to have to, I guess, gently convince our inner child of doing things another way, what is this unknown we are talking about?
Well, the unknown then becomes CCJ, criticizing, comparing, and being judgmental. So use my example again. The boss says, I'm not too sure about this section. I think you've got this wrong. Now you've gone on to the carousel. What should you do? You say, oh, thank you, boss. Could you explain to me why I've got it wrong? Now, the inner child doesn't want to do that because it believes the authority figure, in this case, the child, or it could be the parent, or it could be somebody that you hold valuable, would then criticize you, judge you, or compare you. And the inner child doesn't want that. It doesn't want for somebody else to confirm they're biased.
But so are we saying that we need to get comfortable with the idea that we inevitably in life, to some extent, will be compared, will be judged, will potentially be negatively criticized? And you know what? So this is us speaking to our inner child, darling. That's okay, because that's their opinion. It might be to do with my skill set, if it's to do with something to do with work or career, but also oftentimes, particularly in personal situations, it's to do with this other person's perspective, this other person's history, this other parent's lens, worldview, baggage, if you like. And none of these things, none of the CCJ has any impact on our true worth and value.
That's right. You said a lot there, Alex. And so everybody you will meet, whether that's your family members, your friends, people at work, colleagues, bosses, will judge you. That's the reality. They will have their opinion. Thank goodness. They should have their opinion. For the inner child, they don't want that because, as you rightly said, they see that as criticism and they see that confirming their lack of worth, which again is what the inner child believes. There's a lack of worth. There can't be a lack of worth. So the inner child will not want to hear that. So it will prefer to go onto the carousel because although, and this is again what people don't understand, although it's uncomfortable, although they don't like it, they would want something else, it's familiar. And in my tradition of Taoism, we have a translation into English called humility. Now, a lot of us dislike that idea of being humble because we see it as a weakness. But again, I'll go back to my example. The boss says, okay, this project you just delivered to me, I like it, except for this bit. Now, if you were humble, you would say, oh, thank you, boss. So you like 90% of it, you don't like 10%. Could you tell me what about the 10% you don't like?
Yeah.
That would be being humble, being interested. Perhaps he's
Curious.
got a point.
Yeah.
Perhaps he hasn't got a point, you see. Perhaps he's giving you wrong instructions. Perhaps he wants something more he hasn't told you about. But the inner child doesn't want to enter into that discussion, to have that curiosity, to have that humility, to enter in and say, oh, well, you never told me that, boss. You never mentioned that in the instructions you gave me. Look, you never mentioned that. So the inner child doesn't want to enter that because it doesn't want to chance the opportunity that it will receive CCJ, criticism, comparing, or being judged. Oh, your colleague did it much better. Oh, it must be that there's something wrong. It doesn't want to go there because I've got a little saying as well. I've got these little sayings like the inner child wants what it wants when it wants it. And the inner child also has this belief, better the devil you know. So let me go on the carousel. It's not good, it's the devil, but I know it.
So, David, I can see with the example we've been using here and with, the inner child part of our mind wanting to avoid the CCJ is what then pushes us onto the carousel. And that we need to teach that part of our mind, we need to reparent our inner child in the area of our true value and worth, that we are ultimately lovable, ultimately good enough in this sort of situation, because there are the misaligned beliefs that are getting triggered here. In a situation where someone may hop onto the emotional carousel because they're facing a situation which they perceive as scary, unknown, disastrous outcomes, then they experience the emotional feelings of anxiety and stress. Do we then also, in that case, have to teach our inner child about we can cope? So if the first example kind of triggers the core beliefs, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, therefore I want to avoid CCJ, which then plays into that, the worst case scenario thinking type carousel leap is connected to the misaligned core belief that I cannot cope with this. I'm not going to be able to cope with this.
I want to take you back to what you very first said,
Okay.
Alex, because it's very interesting. You said, if the inner child hops onto the carousel because he perceives something as scary, see what it's already done?
It's on the emotion.
It's on the emotion.
Yeah.
And now Alex understands this model. But in our wording, in our phrasing, we are so used to using the emotion. So I would stop the inner child then. And this is what drives a lot of my clients mad, because I stop you. And I would say, stop. Why are you now perceiving this is scary? What is the belief that created that emotion that you call scary? That's the key. It's like a fork in the road. Once you say, I'm hopping onto the carousel because it's scary, you've given me an emotion. Mm-hmm. You've given me the consequence. What's the belief that you as created scary? So as you then went on to say when you expanded, the belief is I can't cope. Right. Now, give me the evidence why you can't cope. Now you will see immediately the inner child will start to resist this. And I can tell you what a lot of my clients say, well, I've never coped. Well, that's not true. And even if it was true, it's only confirmation bias, because if you believe you can't cope, guess what? You won't cope. So you've got to go back to the core belief. This is what we call reparenting. When did that first come on? When did that first happen? When did you believe and took it into your psyche, your who you are, what I call the vow? Why do you believe that you can't cope? Are you the only person in the universe that can't cope? And then you will take it back to something that happened in your childhood. It may be you came back from school, had a bad report, your mum or your dad was angry with you and lost their temper or didn't handle the situation correctly. And then you said that to yourself, I can't cope with this. This is all too much for me. And then that becomes your belief. Your belief then creates the emotion. And now you're so used to saying, I can't do that because that's scary. See, you've used an emotion. And then you're on the carousel. It's scary, I'm frightened, I'm stressed, I'm overstressed, I'm overwhelmed. See, now the carousel is spinning because now all you're doing is adding more and more emotion. Oh, it's fearful. Oh, it's too much for me. Oh, and you're just explaining more feelings and more feelings. And getting off the carousel is to go to the core belief. I can't cope. Okay, why can't you cope? That's the golden thread. Why do you believe you can't cope? When in actual fact, when you look at the evidence, you've always coped. I always say on these teachings, you are a coping machine. That's what we all have to do. Can you cope better? Well, of course you can cope better. Can you cope more gracefully, more easily, more in your flow? This is what this teaching is about. How do you do that? By going back to your true worth and value and being truthful to yourself. Because, I'll finish on this before the next question, you know who is the greatest critic of you? Yourself. You absolutely judge yourself unmercifully. You judge yourself. You constantly tell yourself you can't cope. You constantly tell yourself you're not good enough. You constantly doubt yourself and doubt your worth. So to the inner child part of your psyche, you are the worst critic than anybody else because you're doing it to yourself first in your self-talk. If you don't believe me or you doubt me, when you finish this video for the next hour, when you're doing your normal life, try and notice how many times you doubt yourself. Try and notice, and it will be in the teens. It won't be once. It will be one after another because this is why it's a carousel. Once you step on the carousel, it spins.
And I think, David, just to say, you mentioned the golden thread there, the golden thread process, and that's David's therapy model that he uses with all his clients. And in essence, the difference is we have the choice. We stay going round and round, circuiting with the emotions on this carousel of despair, or we use the golden thread process to begin to question and interrogate the thoughts and beliefs that are going on that are creating the emotions. So rather than it being a kind of closed circle that we can't get off, the golden thread process pauses the emotions and asks, what am I thinking here? So it uses the emotions as a starting point and then says, well, what's my thought process here that are generating the emotions? It questions, what are the core beliefs behind these emotions? And it's a linear, sequential, logical, unemotional, if you like, process of inner self-inquiry that leads us to the source of the problem and leads us off the carousel of despair.
That's right, Alex. So I'm going to ruffle lots of feathers now. So if you suffer or create what you call anxiety, for instance. I would prefer to call it a red light emotion. I think that's a messenger. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. And why I like to call it a red light, imagine you're driving your car and the red light comes on the dashboard and you pull into a garage and the mechanic says, I'll fix that in 2 seconds. Let me unscrew the bulb. There you are, the red light is gone now, carry on driving. You would not do that. Why? Because you know the red light is telling you there's something deeper in your engine which is wrong. And this is what you call anxiety, I call a red light, is actually helping you. It's flagging up. It's saying that there's something in your belief system fundamentally misaligned. So the red light is the opening door for the golden thread. And as Alex has just explained, it's almost like reverse engineering. Why do I believe that? What is the reason? And it follows it down like following a thread to a core belief. And you'll normally find it's the one of the 3 lies, or all 3. I'm not good enough. I can't cope. I'm unlovable or I'm unworthy. And none of that in all of my practice. I've been doing this for over 40 years. No one has ever shown me that that is the truth. In fact, I do not even understand the statement. If you think of the first one, I'm not good enough. Write that down. Not good enough for whom? What? Who's saying that? Who's the judge that's judging you're not good enough against what? It actually doesn't make sense. I can't cope. Well, you wouldn't be here looking at this teaching and listening to this teaching if you couldn't cope. You've always coped. You are a coping machine. I'm not worthy. Then you have to ask, write it down. I'm not worthy. Who judges that? Who says I'm not worthy? What do they judge it against? And am I prepared to give them the authority to judge my worthiness when, as a child, we are born, our birthright is worthiness and value. You don't pick up a newborn and say, well, you're not worthy until you do something. A newborn is inherently, innately worthy, and you're that newborn. Nobody can add to that, and nobody can take it away. So when you look at these 3 lies in detail, now the inner child will not want you to look at these 3 lies because it's unfamiliar, and it will want to stick to what it knows. I'm going to repeat this again, this is so important. The inner child will stick to what it knows, even if it's not successful. It will want to go down the same path, even if it means it's not going to work, because that's familiar.
And I will put links in the show notes to our Inner Child Reparenting playlist and our Golden Thread Process playlist, which will give you a lot more information and a lot more practical tips and advice on how to do the work that David is describing here. But ultimately, if we learn to understand, interpret our emotions, and do the self-inquiry process, the golden thread process, that will lead us off the carousel of despair. And it will also put us in a position where we are better managing our inner child, and that inner child part of our mind is also trusting us, so is less emotionally triggered, and that's emotional freedom. Emotions are no longer running our life.
Exactly, that's what this is all about, really. It's emotional freedom, that it won't lead you off the carousel. You don't have to go on the carousel, because what you're saying is true. For instance, is it true that you're not good enough? Then if that's a statement, you should be able to give yourself and me, if you're working with me, the evidence why you're not good enough. So again, I'll give you what a client will say. Well, my mother doesn't love me. Okay, let's say that's true. Your mother doesn't love you. Does that mean you're not good enough? It just means, I would say, the problem lies with your mother. The problem doesn't lie with you. Why do you believe your mother? Why do you believe if your mother or your father or your husband or your boyfriend or whatever doesn't love you, Why would you take that responsibility and put it on yourself? But this is what the inner child does. And that's why it needs the reparenting to change that faulty belief.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Well, I really hope you have enjoyed this teaching. Please do check out those links in the show notes so you can do more work on this and really, really sort out your emotional health. Next week, David is producing a beautiful new guided meditation on exactly this topic to help you embed the teaching. So do check in for that. If you enjoy David's teachings, please also check out his free Substack blog. He produced new posts on there every week, and they will absolutely keep you in your Wu Wei Wisdom flow. So I will put a link to the blog in the show notes. If you'd like to work one-to-one with David, he works with clients all over the world via Zoom every week. Please also check out the link in the show notes for David's consultations. We look forward to sharing with you again very soon. Bye-bye.